Welcome, everyone. Good to see you here. We're going to have a nice turnout. We are recording this, and we will make the recording available. There's some technical administrative stuff to do first, so it might be a couple of days. I'm Jim Kornman, co-chair for San Juan County FAC. Also co-chair Ken Burtness represents Lopez. I represent San Juan. And we have 7 members in our FAC, 4 representatives for the 4 Ferry served islands, representative for council, Christine Minnie. Welcome. Representative for commercial haulers is Pat McKay. She's not able to join us. We also have a representative for the tourism businesses, a major business segment for the county. That would be Deborah Hoskinson. She's also not able to be here. Jennifer, you here? Jennifer represents Shaw Island.
I'm here. Of course, Shaw's here.
Of course they are. And
the heart of the San Juans.
Indeed. And Justin Paulson represents Orcas Island. I don't see him. I think he's here.
I am here. We're just a little slightly less interesting than Shaw.
Thank you. I think I got everybody. And we also, our meetings often include Debbie Young representing muting and Captain Russ. Administrative, please mute your microphone when you're having coffee and other things. And then certainly unmute and when you want to speak, when we get to discussion sessions. I want to welcome Debbie Young. She's the, I think, vice chair now for the Washington State Transportation Commission, and often joins us. Not part of the FEC formally, but she does share a lot of our interests, and she lives on Lopez.
Thanks, John.
Welcome. And Representative Ramel, Alex Ramel, I saw you join. Welcome. Okay.
Yeah, thanks for the invite.
Certainly.
Thanks for being there.
So a couple of opening remarks, and then what we'd like to do is a short version of our, current status, where we're at, how we got to the current troubles and problems, what's been happening recently, and where we see things going from here. And please mute your microphones if you can. That would be very helpful. If you're on a phone, I don't see anybody on a phone, but if you're on a phone, it's *6 to mute or unmute. And when we get to discussion, we'll ask you to raise your hands, because we've got a screen full of names and faces. And if you raise your hand, it pops to the top of our screen, and we'll be able to call upon you. And if you're on a phone, *9 to raise or lower your hand. And if you're on a computer, there should be a little button down below on a phone or a computer. I know on a computer it's under reactions for some reason, and hand down. So how do I get rid of my hand? Same thing. Click it again. No, didn't work. Oh, this is always exciting. No, I'm sorry, that's my raised hand. Now I've got too many of these things. Lower hand and get rid of that thing. Okay, fine. Everybody got it? Terrific. So let me just say a few words, and I'll turn it over to Ken. Ken's background is a long-time background with WSF. He can explain. My background is engineering. I like to fix things and take them apart. We're volunteers. We're all your neighbors. So again, please be respectful. We're here to help. We're not the government. It's okay. Our job is to collect opinions, suggestions, advice, problems, issues, advise ferries, keep county council informed. So work together, in other words. We're appointed by county council, but FACs are created by state code, RCW, for the purpose of advising ferries. We also follow Ferry legislation, and particularly we're great fans of funding, which we'll touch on, and maybe Alex can add a few words for us. When we get to discussion, we won't be setting a time limit, but please do be respectful of time, because we'd like everybody to be able to have a comment and ask questions. And if they're simple questions, we'll try to answer them. If it's involved, we'll make notes and discuss at our next FAC meeting. You can also include any comments or questions in chat. There is a little chat box. I've got one open. Ken's watching it also. We will try to pick up questions there. And if we can, we'll answer them or just make note. And we do share that with the FACs, the FAC members, right? So I think the thing we all need to remember is that this is not a new problem. It didn't start with COVID. It didn't start with mandates. It's been at over 2 decades in the making. It goes back to when the motor vehicle excise tax disappeared. Major funding for ferries, both capital and operational, was disappeared, taken off the table. We can put names on and talk about why it doesn't matter. It is. The system has been declining since then. They've been struggling to build boats. There have been new boats built in the last 10, 12 years. Each one was a struggle, a separate piece of legislation to build a boat, or in the case of the 64 cars, build a few boats. And we have, looking forward, we have this last session, legislative session, was huge for ferries. There was a 17 billion with a B transportation package. 16 of it went somewhere else, but $1 billion was invested in ferries, and that went into committing to construct 5 new vessels, which are in the bidding process now. Also, big effort, big focus on hiring, rebuilding the workforce, and training. And training is something that I think in the past legislature, or maybe the governor's office, has struggled with, because it doesn't have a direct benefit, except that a lot of the jobs on WSF, which I hope Ken will talk about, are highly trained positions. And those are the ones that are the senior workforce, the guys with the most experience, the guys that have for decades been at or past retirement age. And when COVID came, most of them were, many of them at least, were over 65, were offered medical retirement, medical leave. Many of those turned it into retirement, having served for decades. So that was a major blow, not just to the numbers in the workforce, but also the most experienced senior positions. And many, probably most of our recent issues have been workforce related. And it's not the entry-level positions. Those are easy to backfill, and they are doing that already. But it takes a while to get folks trained. So on that note, Ken, why don't you say a few words about about your experience and what you see as the big issues right now?
So I just thought I'd try to give a quick synopsis of what we can look forward to here as we go forward. The most immediate concern is the workforce issue, not having enough employees to cover all the jobs. So the boats are manned by they have a engine room, engine department, and a deck department. The deck department consists of the entry-level position is ordinary seaman, then the skilled position that requires Coast Guard exams and sea time is an able-bodied seafarer. And then in the licensed deck officers, we have a mate and a captain. So and then the there is a wiper, and then the skill position that requires Coast Guard exam is the oiler, and then they have I think the engineers are rated like third engineer, second engineer, chief engineer, something along those lines.
Assistant.
I'll mostly focus on the deck department because that's what I'm most familiar with, but the engine room is a similar circumstance. So Washington State Ferries has a very good training program going right now, thanks to the legislature this year fully funded hiring more people and money for training. Since last fall, I believe that Washington State Ferries has hired some 150 people. So that's going to help a lot. But for that, I'm assuming that most of those are hired at as an ordinary seafarer in an entry-level position. To get them to the next level, to an able-bodied seafarer, requires, I can't remember exactly now, it's either 1 year, a year and a half, something like that, of sea time. That's so 1 year of sea time, the Coast Guard requires, that's 1 day of sea time for each day you work. So when you're only working 5 days a week, for these new hires for Washington State Ferries to get up to the next level is going to take like a year and a half, 2 years before they're able to move up. And then for the able-bodied seafarers, it's another couple of years of sea time to transition up to a mate, and then from a mate to a master again, just for the sea time itself is another couple of years. So from the bottom to the top is actually probably takes even longer than those time periods. I think one of the main things, main training programs that's going on right now is to get people from able-bodied to mates. The state is really doing a great job there, but it takes a long time. They're encouraging as many people as they can to take that training, and they're paying for them to do it. But it's at least a minimum 6 months after you have all your sea time and everything to do all the studying. It's a tremendous amount of work. Just maybe for comparison, I heard a discussion not long ago that to take a bar exam is like a 3-day exam, which is, I'm sure, very strenuous. To get your mate's license and all your pilotage is probably at least 15 full days in the Coast Guard examination room. So it's not an easy thing. It's many hours of study. Washington State Ferries does have a good training program going for that, and for all other classes too. The engine department, they have a great program going now, and they're really doing all they can. They've hired a recruiter to recruit as many people as they can, and they are recruiting from the maritime academies. But there are no unemployed merchant mariners out there. Pretty much they have jobs already, and they're really not going to come to Washington State Ferries. So this in-house training is pretty much the route that's going to have to be taken. And it looks as though Washington State Ferries is doing a great job. They have the funding now to do that, but it's going to take a while. Going forward into the future, I do believe that we'll have a stable workforce. I do believe that Washington State Ferries will have enough people, and we will have, we won't have, I think we can get above where we're at now, where we're having all these cancellations on short notice. So I do think that that's a very reasonable assumption that we will have a stable workforce and not have to deal with that, but it's going to take a while. Other things, where did my notes go? Coming up very soon, I believe Washington State Ferries is going to be approaching the public about rewriting the schedules. Everybody knows that the schedule that we've had for over 10 years is simply not adequate anymore. Washington State Ferry's management is aware of that. All the employees on the boats are aware of it. They don't like the schedule either. And of course, we're all aware of it. Major cause of this is with the schedule being over 10 years old, the boats have slowed down since those schedules were made. And even just a few minutes slower between, say, Lopez and Anacortes throughout the day can add up to considerable delay. Plus, many more of the boats are full now than they were 10 years ago, and loading a boat that's full takes a considerable amount more time than loading a boat that's only 3/4 full. It's not a linear relationship. The last 10% of the boat takes considerably more time than loading the rest of it. So we have slower boats and we have more full boats, which requires more dwell time. So I believe next year, from our last conversation with John Bazina, it sounded like maybe the first part of spring, maybe first part of next year, spring or something, we should be opening up to get that, get a rewrite of the schedule. That's going to be a very important thing. It's going to be very difficult because we will not be having, any more boats to go from the number of boats we have now. We're not going to have an increase in boats, ever. That's not going to happen. So to try to get better service out of the same number of boats is going to be difficult. It's probably going to require more funding from the state legislature to fund more hours. One of the critical things with the schedule coming forward is going to be our winter schedule, where we cut back the inter-island boat from three crews to 2 in the winter. It's going to be very difficult to improve our schedule at all, and especially in the winter, without increasing that inter-island boat to 3 crews for the winter. It's just very difficult to have a good schedule through the weekend without that inter-island boat. So that's going to be important, is to try to get that, very important to get that 3rd crew. Washington State Ferries has proposed going to a 2-season schedule, some extended summer schedule, and then 1 schedule through the winter. That would probably be best case scenario. The long range plan doesn't call for that to happen for a few more years, but it would seem very reasonable to think that if we could, since they're going to the trouble of rewriting the schedule, it would certainly make sense to me if they would accelerate that and go to just a 2-season schedule. There's a lot of pluses to that. I would encourage everybody to pay attention to that, and that's going to be coming up. And again, a lot of it's going to depend on what sort of funding Washington State Ferries can get. They can't do anything without, funding from the legislature. Let's see, reservations. I'll touch a little bit on supply and demand. Our supply of boats is not going to increase for the next, probably. There is really, I don't feel any chance that we're going to have any more boats up here for the term of the long range plan, which is 40 years or till 2040. So I don't think we can see any increase in the number of boats. The long range plan seems to indicate that they're projecting an increase in ridership by some 30%. So going forward for the next many years, we're going to have a fixed supply here, and demand is going to be increasing. So I think we really need to realize that is going to be our lot going forward, is increased demand, fixed supply. There is certainly some opportunity for increasing that supply by increasing crew hours, but we'll see how that goes. So that brings me to reservations. I believe that with this, given that the reservation system is going to be more and more important going forward, There are some things that need to be done with the reservation system. The software for the reservation system is really not adequate and creates a lot of problems. So, but unfortunately, last I heard that software upgrade would be several $1 million. So that's another thing that the legislature, that's kind of where that comes down to also. But that's going to be very critical for us going forward, is that reservation system, improving that software and improving the problems that we do have with the reservation system. As long as we're talking about the legislature and money, I would really encourage all of you to write all of our legislators. And Alex, I'm not doing this just because you're here. I did it the other day, and I do this all the time. But right in the legislatures, I believe for all of you to be very important. We've got Senator Liz Lovelet and, Representative Alex Remmel and Representative Deborah Luckenoff. They have really done a great job with ferries. They're all very pro ferries. I believe all of them are very instrumental in getting the funding that we have, and instrumental in getting the $1 billion for the new boats. So I would really recommend you contact all of these representatives and senator, and thank them for all the great work that they've done, and letting them know that our service relies on their funding. The Sydney run coming forward is going to be very important, especially with this new schedule rewrite. It's going to probably have to be decided what they're going to do with the Sydney run. But the Sydney run is going to be a very, say, political issue. On our side, everybody from the governor through the legislature through the city of Anacortes, they're all going to be weighing in on this. And I'm sure on the Canadian side, there's going to be similar stakeholders are going to be weighing in on that. So the Sydney run is going to be important for us here also, whether that's going to be continued. The number of boats that we're building is going to be a critical issue going forward. Washington State Ferries wants to build 16 boats between now and 2040. That is $3.2 billion. They've already approved $1 billion, but the total cost for that is $3.2 billion by 2040. By 2040, all but 10 boats are going to be up to about 50, 60 years old. So they're a pretty good portion of the boats that we have are going to need to be retired by 2040, if not very much sooner. So it's important that we get those new boats built. The long range plan calls for the long range plan calls for the first 5 of these boats. I believe that is to be built from 2022 to 2027 or 2028. And it is now, that projection has gone back now from the first boat, instead of being built in 2022, will be built in 2027, and the last one built maybe 2032. So the long range plan for boats is already 5 years behind. If from 2027 to 2040 they build a boat every year, that means with the boats that will have to be retired, Washington State Ferries will only have 23 boats at that time, and they really feel like they need 26. So getting enough boats built is going to be very problematic to accelerate that. To get to the 26 boats that Washington State Ferry says they need is going to require more than one every year. So that's going to be difficult. So we'll see what happens. John Vizena of Washington State Ferries at our last FAC meeting said that problem has been recognized, and that there has been some discussion on how to accelerate getting those boats built. So, but again, that's, you know, 3.2 billion dollars. The, you know, there is some hope there. The 6 Issaquah class boats were built from, right around 1980. 6 of them built in just a couple of years. So it can be done. Maybe. We'll see what happens. So anyway, long run, those kind of the outlook there. I think we need to realize that, you know, I believe that Washington State Ferries will be able to provide us with a stable system, but as far as increasing service, the capacity, I think that's a very iffy thing. So we're just gonna have to realize that that's to me is a pretty high probability.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Couple of comments. We get a lot of questions that, well, the new boats aren't coming here, so who cares? They will be diesel, hybrid electric with batteries. They will probably go down sound, at least the first ones, because the runs are shorter. They can run completely on electric. It's also close to the maintenance terminal, but I'm sure that wasn't a thought. We will, however, you know, it's the trickle-down theory. We will get replacement boats. Yakima is 50-something years old, will be retired in the next few years. She was one of 4 supers, and at the time the plan was done, the super class was considered at risk. In the last 10 years of their lifetime, they're not going to get major refurbishment. If something happens, they will be pulled out of service. And to underscore that point, after the long-range plan was completed, Hayak needed major work and was retired. And same with Elwha. Elwha needed about $20–25 million worth of additional steel work after they spent $15 million on a new passenger deck, and she was retired. And those are boats that were less than 60 years old. So 60 years is the nominal lifetime, but it's by no means a guarantee. So, and as Ken mentioned, the Issaquah class are, they had a lot of early troubles, and they had a lot of early refits, and they probably, Ferries doesn't think they're going to go to 60. They're considered at risk basically now. So what I'd like to do is open it up to comments, questions. I'd like to, we're going to do this, raise your hand. Carolyn, recognize you, have your hand up already. Perfect. Don't forget to unmute yourself and state your name and what island you're from. That'd be very helpful to us. And I'd like to start with folks that weren't able to come on the Saturday session. We're going to try to get around to everybody. We've got about 40 people here. Great turnout. Thank you. But do be mindful of time. So, and if you're on the phone, we had a phone joiner. I did mute you from this end. You can unmute yourself with *6. And if you want to put your hand up to make a comment on a phone, that would be *9. And for the rest of you folks, it's one of those buttons on the bottom. And good luck. Thank you. All right, Carolyn, over to you.
Thank you. Much appreciated. I am Caroline Armand, and I am a San Juan Island resident for over 20 years. And I depend on the Washington State Ferries for my transportation to medical services, essential products, and to my family. I've had a 20 trip and been stuck on the mainland as ferry service is declined and been canceled. I don't have the spare income for these additional unforeseen expenses. Many islanders have suffered these impacts as well, as the San Juan County Economic Developmental Council survey shows. Reliable ferry service is an essential needed service for island residents. I noticed the decline in ferry reliability and services over the years, now at a precarious point. My understanding is the vessel fleet is aging, Maintenance has been delayed, and there is a limited amount of ferries to replace broken down ferries. I appreciate the state plans and budget to address these issues and ask that this be prioritized. I appreciate retaining and advocating for more sustainable living wage employment opportunities for ferry workers. Now, is there an awareness of the difficulty for ferry workers of their schedules of working 10 consecutive days that requires alternating day and evening shifts that impact their sleep, add stress, and is unsafe and unhealthy? The Federal Aviation Administration recently ruled that flight crew must have 10 hours off between flights. And is there an awareness that ferry workers must bid for their job each season, and that all ferry workers are not provided radios or a way to communicate with each other while loading and unloading ferries? Where are the ferry workers union representatives? And what are they doing for ferry workers and all these issues? I'm sorry to say, but the poor management of the ferry system is showing the cracks that have been happening for decades and is breaking down in multiple ways, as we are all aware. I hope equitable rebuilding of the workforce, ferries, and management will come out of this. And I would also appreciate resident islanders having some priority for reservations. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Carolyn. Comments are noted. I can answer one question quickly, which is the work hours is under Coast Guard regulation. And there's also, a variety of other issues that are controlled by ferries. But at the end of the day, the Coast Guard regulations are comparable to what you said for aircraft, absolute limits that do not get exceeded. You may recall October 1st, a couple of weeks ago, we had 2 ferries out of service on a Saturday. The reason they were out of service is that because of fog the day before, they got so far behind. Crews went over hours and they had to be relieved, and there weren't enough relief crew available to substitute for them. And this isn't just one person on the boat, 2 full crews went over Coast Guard hours. So it is taken very seriously, and it is safety related. But thank you.
But no, I understand that. I just want to comment, and I have to say, and I won't name the person, but I know a ferry worker, obviously, for my comment. And that person, before that happened, they had worked until 12 p.m. because they had to go to Anacortes to get fuel. And then the next day, they had to get up at 5. So they had a 5-hour break. That's what I'm saying. That's not being addressed. If you're going on a morning cruise or ferry and then switching the next day to an evening, that's really stressful. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Lynn.
Yes, I would also like to see some consideration of priority for residents in making reservations, because it's very difficult to try to get on the phone at exactly 7 o'clock. If you're at 7:02, you can't get a reservation, which means you can't get home from a doctor's appointment on the mainland. So for those of us who live in the islands, being able to get back is essential. And I would hope there'd be some way of setting a priority reservation for that, so we're not doing this Russian roulette thing 2 days before or 2 weeks before. Also, I'm wondering, oh, go ahead.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm also wondering what the likelihood is of going to a 2-season schedule. That makes a lot of sense to me. I've been living here running the ferries for 40 years, and it just drives you nuts trying to remember, is it 215 or 220, or is it, what is it this month?
Yeah, exactly. Regarding priority, you'll be shocked to know, we raise that issue with WSF about 10 times a year. And one of the issues that needs to be resolved, and I'm not saying it can't be, is that ferries are largely state funded. And when when you fund something on a state level, you can't tell people in a different part of the state they don't have the same access. But so that's a fundamental problem. The schedules, I don't know. We're going to have to dive in and see. One of the issues with most routes, but especially here, is that our traffic varies greatly between peak of summer and the dead of winter. So the reason we wound up now with 4 schedules is trying to optimize the vessels and the crew hours to the expected ridership. But it does cause a lot of problems, and 2 seasons is definitely on the table for discussion. And this will be a public process probably early next year, where ferries will put together some schedules and we'll all sit around a big room and throw darts and see what we can do with it. Thank you.
Prior to 2003, there was only 3 schedules. There was a summer schedule, fall schedule, and a spring schedule. And at that time, the fall and the spring schedule were actually the same, or very, very similar. There really was not much change at all, except for a couple of minute tweaks. And the schedule changed about the middle of February. So essentially back then we did have a two schedule system. So it's really not without precedent at all. And back then there was also the inter-island boat was 3 crews all year round, and there was no cutback in the winter. So to go to that, and especially with the increase in summer schedule into the shoulder season, to go to a 2-season schedule really is not pushing things at all. It's a very reasonable thing. And Washington State Ferries Management, I know, has acknowledged that there are a lot of pluses to that. So we do have a good opportunity to push for that in this upcoming schedule change. But again, the long range plan doesn't call for that to happen for I'm trying to remember, maybe 2028. Can't remember. But at any rate, it would be really good to try to push for that now. And again, a lot of it just falls back on whether the legislature is willing to fund that again. But it does make a lot of sense. There's a lot of good arguments to do that.
Yeah, understood. Yeah, and remember that the plan is a plan, and plans can change. So we'll have to see how it all develops. And the reason they redo it every 10 years is because by the time that 10-year comes around, it's pretty out of date. Patty. Patty, your hand is up. Go ahead. You need to unmute.
I'm up. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. I had a couple things. The telecom, it's just not viable. I don't know. I mean, I feel totally cut off from the other islands. It's, I mean, there's lack of crew, but it does break down. People feel stranded. Like I think I told you, we had to take our little sailboat over just to make sure that we didn't get stranded when we had some business with the county auditor, and it broke down, and we had our boat to get back to Orcas. A friend of ours, drives for beverage. He had to like go to Anacortes and then try to get back to Orcas because the boat was canceled. We have a hospital over there that we can't get to because I feel like we're going to get stranded. We've got kids going to school. That boat is 60-some years old, and we've got people that work there. We've got business to do, and yet I haven't been to San Juan for 2.5 years, especially since we got the telecom. So that's one of my things. It's just, I don't know. Is there any way we can get the High-U back? I'm teasing, but it's just not viable. It's terrible to have this situation where you can't rely on getting back, and you can't even feel like you can go visit somebody on an island. So that's one of my things. And then I know when I was with a meeting with the state, there was mentioning about trying to get the workers have this screwy system where they're they're not full-time. They kind of keep them on a part-time basis, and they have to travel all around the sound, and that's not conducive to keeping people. It's really hard. My friend just went through this. He finally made assistant, but he started out as an oiler, and he was traveling all over the place. And they admitted that's not a good system, and they were going to work on it and to do away with that. So I was wondering an update on that by any chance, because like I said, and why don't we have a schedules? We don't have schedules anymore. You have to print them out on the internet. There's a lot of people like my husband that doesn't know how to do that. They were nice enough to give him something down at the Orcas. I printed them out. He said he didn't understand it. You know, so I know that's probably a money saving thing, but we don't even have schedules. I understand the priority thing because of state, but it's just, I feel trapped. And I'm lucky enough that I bought a little place on Fidalgo with a trailer. So I've got medical issues, and, you know, I do play that game of every 2 weeks, 2 days, 2 months, you know, but 2 months you don't hardly know. And, you know, it's just very stressful. A nice Ferry gal, though, did a very nice thing for me one time. And she said, you know, we do have, and I said, what about people that don't have computers? And she said, we actually do keep back some reservations for people like that, like my husband, that you can call a little later on in the day, and we could usually get you on a reservation. So that was kind of nice to know. But my thing right now is like, what are they going to do about the telecom? It's got to go. And
It will eventually. Let me take a try at that. There's only 3 boats that could reasonably serve there's 2 boats that could reasonably serve Inner Island. The third, which is okay in the dead of winter, is one of the 64-car boats. This is Sailor Show, the Port Townsend boats. They're really too small. Then what you need for an Inner Island boat is no upper decks on the wings. You've been on it a lot. They run cars down one outside lane and back up the other side to get them turned around. You don't want to spend a lot of time backing off tractor trailers and so forth. So that's Tillicum or the South. Interesting you mentioned Hayu. I understand it is for sale. It was sold by the state, turned into a party boat on Lake Washington, I think. Maybe it's certainly worth asking. I'm not sure that it's still in a reasonable Coast Guard inspection state, in lack of maintenance. But that would be a good backup if it were available, because things are not the same now as they were when the state decided to sell it. So the question is South versus Tillicum. And on the one hand, I know, you know, Tillicum is homeported here, and full credit to her engineering team. She is an old boat, and she's as reliable, I think, as anything else on the fleet. They all have troubles. South will be the other choice, and she will be here for, I think, about 6 weeks next month, while Tillicum goes into the yard and gets work done. So advice on reservations has been mentioned by a couple of folks. As you said, Patty, do call. I mean, particularly if you're having trouble with your internet or fighting the computer or whatever, give them a call. It doesn't have to be at 701. Reservations will often show as unavailable and the first few minutes after the 7 o'clock release. That's computer system delays. Check at 7:05. Many times we've experienced that it shows full at 7:01, and go grab another cup of coffee and check again, and boom, everything's wide open. A lot of folks report good success.
You're correct. They do hold some of their reservations for phone calls only. In other words, they don't release them all right at 7 on the internet. They hold a certain percentage. I don't know what that is, but they do hold a percentage for people that are calling in on their phone.
Right.
And they hold it for a certain amount of time. I don't know that again either, but they do make consideration for people that do not have computers.
Yeah, I think it's a smallish number, not anywhere near half or anything like that. And it is I think it's a couple of hours until the phone calls die down. So, Patty, thank you for your comments.
Well, I
you know,
have they addressed that other issue about why it's hard to get people sometimes because of having them work on that wonky schedule where they're having to go all over the place. They're not totally full-time. You know, it's not
right.
It's not real. I mean, my friend did it. He luckily had a place to stay at his parents' house up in Anacortes, but he's in a trailer down here and he lives up by Bering. And I mean, it's hard for somebody to want to work for that, for what they're being paid too, you know, starting off. And
Understand.
Ferries did say they knew that wasn't viable and they were going to do something about it, but do you know if anything's been done?
Well, they are working on it, and one of the major pieces of the recent funding was hiring and training. And there's two parts to that. One is up until basically this past year, they were in a cycle of hiring in the springtime for summer work, train entry-level deck crews, work through the summer, and then they'd be offered either layoff or relief work, part-time in other words, not a steady job. And you're right, folks that have families that are trying to get along on a decent wage need a full-time wage. That is one of the things that will be changing, or already is changing, with some additional funding. And it also requires ferries to get a little creative with you don't want guys sitting around doing nothing. You put them to work on other tasks. So it's a culture shift within WSF that they are taking seriously and working on. And the entry level will always be entry level. Go ahead, Ken.
That system per se that we're talking about, all the ramifications of this started with Washington State Ferries back in like 1950 when Washington State Ferries started. So as Jim mentioned, the culture, that's kind of the way Washington State Ferries operated for many, many years. And in a sense, they were able to do that because the jobs were sought after and they didn't have to worry about it. They had all the people that they needed. I'm not saying that they were being callous about it. That's just what it was, is there was plenty of people and they could do that. I do believe that problem has been been recognized very well, and they are, I believe, taking concrete steps to correct it. I mentioned that 150 people have been hired since last fall. I believe that they are all hired as full-time employees. So I think that is a good step. One thing that won't go away is that Washington State Ferries is spread out from Tacoma to Friday Harbor, and people pretty much of necessity have to work on different runs and different ferries. So, you know, that's an issue that Washington State Ferries has that will not go away. But that's not to say that a lot can't be done to make it better for the employees. But again, they are taking steps in that direction, and I believe that I think it's getting better.
Okay, let's move on. We've got a couple of hands up. Lynn, can we come back to you? I've got two others that haven't spoken yet.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, Kaya?
Hi, my name is Kaya and I live on San Juan Island. Oh, you can barely see me. And I grew up on Lopez Island. So I got to, let's see if my camera can actually get in on me, but anyways, so I got to grow up in the islands, and this is a very new thing to me I moved back home right before the pandemic started. And so I experienced being an essential worker during the pandemic and how that affected the ferry workers and the vaccines getting implemented and people quitting and the controversy and the political side of that. Witnessing as a citizen in the community, it was really difficult to watch a lot of people that had worked on the ferries no longer be on the ferries, and then letting people go obviously had a domino effect on what I assume is what we're dealing with, because it seems to parallel the problems that we started in the pandemic never went away. Even as the pandemic let up, we're dealing with the aftermath of decisions, I believe, that were made related to that. There are a couple ultimate concerns that I have as a citizen watching how it affects people in the community. One of them is that I'm recently hearing that a lot of sports are getting affected. Their games are getting canceled. Teams aren't coming from the mainland. Kids aren't able to go over. It's a really long, difficult day on the students. So I know that we talk about medical stuff, but I think we should also be talking about how it's affecting education and the well-being of the children while they're traveling and anybody that's traveling with them. I know it's a big rat race to try to get reservations to get kids to the games on the weekends and things along those lines. The medical side is super concerning to me. I had to actually fly an elderly person because it wasn't safe to wait on a ferry. And that was an interesting variable that I'd never had to deal with before. I think a lot of people are learning to rely on other modes of transportation rather than the ferries because it's less stressful. But it's also really expensive. So the aftermath of the ferries is bleeding into the community in ways that is causing a lot of financial hardship. I see the ferry costs are going up and up and up. We're not getting prioritized. We don't have Kamaya like Hawaii does, where we get a local discount for contributing to the taxes and being the people that are present, keeping the island going year round. I saw in a comment that it's unconstitutional to prioritize the locals, which makes absolutely no sense to me when we are basically we're stranded from our own homes on a regular basis. I work on all the islands, and the expense of a ferry on a client, if I have to move a group of employees, can triple the cost of a job just based on waiting time, where there's no productions happening and people are just wasting money on ferries that is not getting put back into the ferry system. So it's bleeding out a community that's already suffering. And I'm not sure people realize how many dominoes fall when you think of an inflation because somebody is risking bringing their crew over. If you have to a lot of companies stopped servicing the San Juan Islands entirely over this, which is also monopolizing the local businesses that know that they are the only person that you can call, and their rates are increasing based on that. The 40% increases in almost all materials, and it's almost directly related to the hardship of getting product. This isn't necessarily a worldwide. A lot of it literally has to do with delivery. So we really need to start thinking about, it's not just the daily interaction. And we go from, like people have said, I catch the red eye ferry with the truckers simply to be present at a decent time during the day, because if I try to catch any of the later boats, more often than not, those are the ones that are canceled. And so it's better for me to sleep in my truck at the ferry to bring back materials than it is to try to schedule any kind of normalcy around the schedules. I just sleep in the truck, but that's not healthy. And when people have medical stuff that they can't get to, none of this is healthy. I mean, the community is suffering, and I'm confused why we don't have a national disaster involved in some sort of funding. If we can't rely on the state to bring it, then let's get it from a different source.
Thank you. Yeah, good point. So thank you very much. Tom?
Aha, unmuted.
Yes.
Yes, sir. I was going to reiterate something that Patty said. Well, first off, my name is Tom Bridge. I live on Crane Island. I also own property on Orcas Island. Crane Island being an outer island, I have a lot of boats available to me, which has come in really handy of late. But I just wanted to reiterate something that Patty talked about strandings on the inner island runs and how that relates to our community being more fractured because we're more isolated at each island. And so we're less of a community and more, it's almost like we're like kind of competing for who's the worst damaged by Washington State ferries and instead of being like a community about it. So I'm a little bit irked about that, but I just wanted to let the Ferry Advisory Committee know that, I offered to transport some hospital workers nurses that couldn't get to their job at Peace Health because the Inter-Island Ferry wasn't running. And I have a boat, I can do that. So I volunteered to do that. So this is the kind of thing that is kind of extraordinary measures that are happening in the community. And it's, it's not a very good direction. It's a very, very poor direction. When we know that the Tillicum is as unreliable as it is, and we have a county here, you guys can advise the county on what to do. And there's been several, I've had conversations with counselors about, being able to declare an emergency and having set up ahead of time, maybe some contracts with some of the whale watching boats or something that are, ready to go on a moment's notice, that they could take some of that inter-island traffic, at least on walk-on status, so people could get home. So I think instead of just bitching and moaning, there actually are some solutions that are, within our realm. And that's one of them that I think bears some merit to at least explore and see what that would cost and what the county could pay to help subsidize the ticket. I know we got a lot of funding for COVID that the county just has sitting there in the coffer and it hasn't been spent. Here's something that some of that could be spent on. So that's one suggestion. I know that last year when we had more stress on the ferries, we went to less reservations. Instead of 90%, we went back to 60%. And my own experience of that when that happened was that it really helped solve some of the problems of, we have all these people that showed up to go on the ferry, and the ferry's not running, or it's 2 or 3 hours late, and you've promised kind of less people transportation, and so it's easier for them to get kind of back on track. And so there's another suggestion of what we could do that that's something that's within our realm to do right now. Right, you guys could do that. I know you already know this because everybody asks about it, but if there's anything at all we can do to help with locals getting some kind of priority, and especially some of the workloads that are going back and forth that Kaya mentioned. Large and oversized loads are very difficult to get those reservations because they're all released on day one, and I think some of the companies all sock them up. I personally just took somebody's tiny home from Renton to Orcas Island for them, and I scheduled that for Sunday afternoon because it's against the flow, and that worked. But not everybody has that capability of doing that and being able to schedule their life around kind of a dysfunctional system, right? They need to work Monday through Friday, right? So anything we could do with large size reservations and some kind of priority for locals, I think would be just fantastic, so that we're not kind of at the roulette wheel on the reservation system. So I do know that private business has stepped in as a result of the ferry kind of not working very well. And so airplane flights are way up to the islands. Private boat trips to the island are way up, and commercial boat trips are way up. One of the consequences of this that, again, Kaya mentioned is, we have lost a lot of local workers that are service workers because of just cost of living increases and homes and stuff. And, if we lose those Anacortes workers or workers coming from the mainland, we're not going to have any workers. And that's a real devastating thing for the community. So it has more effect than you might think. So stabilizing the system and figuring out some ways to not just service what I see when I ride the ferry is I see a majority of recreational users to the island coming over. And it's not that that's bad, but it needs to be a better balance, I think, with locals. I don't know how to do that. So that's the tough one.
Thank you. Thank you
You're
for your
welcome.
comments. Yeah, we don't know how to do it either.
Yeah, I know. It's tough. It's really tough. So,
Christine, Lynn has been waiting for a while. Shall we pick her up and then you'll be next? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just be really quick. I forgot to introduce myself, Lynn Barrich from Shaw Island. I'm just wondering if there's been any consideration of a passenger-only ferry that would be inter-island. a lot of the problems we have are just getting people, you know, they can catch a ride. Once they get to the right island, it's just getting there.
Mhm. Yes, I mean, that's been suggested many times. And it's also, we've worked for years with WSF to help them understand that we are not only a county which is isolated completely and dependent upon ferries, but we're also a county that is divided and dependent on ferries to knit us together. WSF, I mean, our role here is advisory to WSF, and WSF, per legislation, is not in the passenger-only ferry business. They did that for a while. They weren't very good at it. Legislature directed them to not do that anymore. So, but there are transit districts. Kitsap, I know, is doing a bunch, and there's passenger-only ferries going on elsewhere. So it's definitely something we should continue as part of the conversation. Christine.
I just wanted to add, you know, from the interactions and from my perspective, some of the suggestions. First, the declaring a state of emergency, which was also brought up at Saturday's outreach meeting, and which didn't get, you know, didn't get my response in the best possible way. If I can boil it down, it is to say that even if we were to go to that length of declaring a state of an emergency, which is to release some large amount of money our direction, the issue here is truly staffing. They're not going to be able to staff the boats to bring it to the level of service that we are expecting because we declare a state of emergency. I'm trying to remember, there was a couple of points that gentleman was asking for clarification on. State of emergency. Oh, and whale watch boats being used to transport passengers, which this time last year, Alex Ramo and myself did attempt in a very deliberate way to address this with the governor's office, seeking funds for just that, among several other things, in terms of providing relief to residents, and no funds were identified. And I guarantee you that our county budget does not live in a very large, deep well with lots of money, and the ARPA funds have already been, for the most part, I'd say probably about 80% spoken for. We only received a certain amount to begin with. There are many aspects of the budget that aren't quite as voluminous as people think they are. Secondly, whale watch boats only have a certain, you know, threshold for being able to transport passengers in the winter and in bad weather. And at the end of the day, there is a risk involved that is perhaps more than the county should be stepping into. I'm not saying that the conversation isn't possible, but there are factors on the other side of why it is, you know, definitely questionable.
Understood. Thank you. Tom, you're waiting for another comment, and Representative Ramo would like to say something also. Tom,
Is that me? Is that me?
Yeah, you, Tom, your hand is up again.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. I probably need to lower my hand there. But I appreciate those comments. I am, of course, the captain of a boat. I actually run a small barge service also. So I'm familiar with all of those factors, and I would appreciate having that conversation. So, because I think there's some possibilities there, and I agree with the risk part and all that. So, so that's all.
Thank you. Yeah, we can take care of your hand for you. Ding. Representative, go ahead. Welcome, by the way. Good to see you.
Oh, thank you. Well, Jim, I was just going to try and jump in towards the end of the conversation. When I raised my hand, I was the last one up. But if I was just going to try and be responsive to the points folks are raising. maybe I'll wait till John and looked like one other person had raised their hand as well.
Good, excellent. Yeah, we've scheduled this from 6 to 7:30. It's a little after 7 now, so I think we're in good shape time-wise. Thank you. John.
Hi, good evening to you. I'm John Pierre Van Dongen, resident of Orcas Island. Appreciate the opportunity to express ourselves on this forum. I have to echo Tom Bridges' comments that this island and the island community is very dependent on the ferry system, and with the dysfunction that is happening at this, the whole community is struggling. I would say that we have to look outside of the box. You've explained very clearly how we got into the problem that we're in, but I hope that we can start looking for creative solutions rather than just wait until 2040 for the Washington State ferry system to follow the current plan, which is obviously not working for us. There are solutions that have been suggested, which I think we should look at in another way. The passenger-only ferry system, I don't think is entirely off the table at all, and I would encourage you as the Ferry Advisory Committee to revisit this. There was a study that was commissioned by the Washington State Legislature, performed by the Puget Sounds Regional Council, published last year, which stated that there was some interest in passenger-only ferry systems, one of which is from Bellingham to Friday Harbor, which would have a boat that cost about $14 million and a $2 million carrying cost a year. When you put that into perspective with the Telecom looking at about $20 million just to keep it running, I think that this is a solution that is definitely worth revisiting. I appreciate all you do, but I do hope you're hearing the pain in people's voices here, and this is something that is affecting the whole island community here. And not only that, but Anacortes communities and several of the ports on the mainland that are dependent on these ferries. So thank you for what you do, and that's, I appreciate us. Sign off.
Thank you, John. And yeah, as I mentioned at the beginning, we are your neighbors. We do share your pain. We have sat for many, many hours ourselves in ferry lines, scratching our heads and wondering what could be done. Patty, a comment?
Okay, am I unmuted?
Yes, you're unmuted apparently.
Patty Cook brought something up too, that the Jones Act, and I know that when I did the ferry meeting with the state, that was talked about. I don't have my notes, about, Canada has ferries probably for sale. Why can't we, get rid of that and have, there's only like one shipyard that seems to be able to make the ferry, and we're just stuck with what there's no bidding, there's no, anyway, I kind of wondered if you knew where that was going with the state, because it was discussed. And again, the Telecom is 60-some years old.
Correct.
Is it really for real we could possibly get the Haiyu back, or were you just, just having something that can get trucks and people back and forth, and that we're not so isolated, and I could get to a hospital and have a mammogram instead of trying to make a reservation to go to the, anyway. That's
I don't know. Buying the Haiyu is above my pay grade. It's a very, very remote possibility, I think. It's been in private hands for quite a few years, and we don't know what shape it's in.
Regarding shipbuilding and purchasing boats, any boats from Canada can't be used in the United States. There's a law 100 years old called the Jones Act that prohibits any boat from sailing from one American port to another. Has to be built in the United States. So So buying a boat from another country is not feasible. As far as the number of shipyards we have, there is a bigger shipyard, which is you're right, that's the one big shipyard that is probably the most capable of building these boats. Unfortunately, negotiations with them to build these new boats broke down. They did design the new boats, but they were not willing to build them at a price that Washington State Ferries agreed to. There are two other shipyards in the state. There's Dakota Creek Shipyard in Anacortes, and they have become a pretty large shipyard. They are capable of pulling ferries out of the water and dry dock, and you see ferries down, Washington State Ferries down there on occasion on the waterfront in Anacortes. So they're capable of working on large boats like that. There's Nichols Brothers on Whidbey Island. They have participated in building new ferries in the past. They've built, for the most part, superstructures. They'll build the top part of the boat, the whole superstructure, the cabin, and then they'll take it down to, say, bigger, and they'll put it on the boat. But Nichols Brothers and Dakota Creek, they have never to take on this new contract to build 5 new boats would be a major step forward with them to be able to do that. It would be a real leap. John Vazina from Washington State Ferries has said that there's been some out-of-state companies interested in partnering with one or more shipyards. I don't know the details. So evidently that has happened, that there's been some interest in from, again, out-of-state entities to partnership with an in-state entity. It is $1 billion contract, so it's going to draw some attention, but I don't know what to tell you about this contract, or the timetable for building these new boats has already been delayed 5 years. So we can only hope that these current bid solicitations come through. Keep your fingers crossed.
So where that is right now, just a brief history. Vigor built the 364s, and I believe that they actually purchased Todd, who's built a couple of generations of ships before that. And then Vigor also built the 4 Olympic class boats. The Samish is the one that's up here. And then they were purchased, I think, about 2 years ago by an East Coast investment firm. And Ferries found themselves talking to bankers instead of shipbuilders. But I think it was 2021 legislature extended the contract, the existing contract for the 4 Olympics, so that they could negotiate a price with Vigor to build the next 5 hybrid Olympic class boats. And so it wasn't a new bid, it was a contract extension. So it didn't go to bid, it went to negotiation, and Ken mentioned that failed, both on price, where they were far apart, and also on assumption of risk. So at that point, Ferries then started the process of looking for qualified builders, and it's called Request for Information. And if you go to the Ferries website, WSF website, and click on About Us and dig down there a little bit, you'll find the document that was provided to prospective builders with a lot of interesting information in it. If you're an information geek, that comments have closed. They are evaluating the potential builders. They haven't told anybody what they've got yet. They will, I believe, in January. And then the next step is a request for proposals. And then we will learn who is actually competing in the bidding process. But there's a qualification step first, and then the bidding process, and that is still billed in Washington. Now, legislature some years ago put a provision in place that if the winning bid is not within 5% of the WSF engineering estimate, professional estimate, then it must be rebid again nationally. Now, you can ask yourself, why not just go to a national bid right away? Secretary of State's office did a a study again a few years back on that question. What is the economic benefit of building in Washington for a higher price versus sending the money elsewhere to build at a cheaper price and never see the revenue again? When you build in Washington, the dollars don't leave, they circulate in the state and contribute to the state's economy. And the conclusion was, meh, it doesn't make a big difference. One way or the other, whether you pay more for the boat and have the money stay in the state and boost the economy or send the money elsewhere and get your boats, it makes no difference. Going outside the US, as Ken mentioned, is federal law. It's been on the books 100 years. It was originally proposed by a Washington state congressman to help protect Puget Sound boat building. And at this point, no one can say that it's really done its job, but it's not going to change. I mean, that's beyond anybody's ability, I think, at this point. It's been there for so long. So, onward. Kaya, you're back.
I'm back. I haven't left. That's the Jones Act. And then somebody mentioned that maybe it had been that there's something that possibly could be done around that. And maybe that goes back to the state of emergency stuff and pleading the argument.
I don't know.
I love the passenger ferry and the fact that that's still on the table. It's hopefully a conversation for people. I was just looking at the cost of, purchasing a passenger ferry for 300 people, and it could be $6 million, but it's not in the 30 million range. And if we had 6 300-person passenger ferries, it would alleviate a ton of problems. And then I messaged in the comment too, or in the chat, that if you start going in that direction, it actually could offset some opportunity to create more revenue for the locals as well. If people are on passenger ferries, then it cuts down on the vehicle traffic on the roads, or it creates a revenue to have rental cars. And then, we're increasing ways that the locals are benefiting by addressing a problem and then keeping the flow going. I think that, as we're going back to the school thing, again, if the students could walk on the ferries, maybe the other schools would pick them up in the buses and things like that. So I feel like we should not lose sight of that passenger ferry option, especially because it's way more economic in the long run and maybe could be a faster fix than waiting on boat yards to maybe be created to maybe make boats that maybe last a couple decades or more.
Yeah, good points. And you're right. I mean, as I mentioned, WSF is not in the passenger only business, but that doesn't mean they can't be, and it also doesn't mean you couldn't do a ferry district of some sort to pay for it. But you do recognize, and I think we all understand, that it would require considerable effort on the transportation systems that connect to ferries, and that's work that ought to be done anyway and will be done. You need to be able to take a passenger only ferry to Anacortes or Bellingham or wherever, and then have some other way to get to the doctor's office, whether it's car shares or whatever. And same thing on the islands. We're fortunate on San Juan that the Commerce Center is next to the ferry terminal, which is why it takes almost an hour to turn the boat around in the middle of summer when everybody's wandering down Spring Street looking at the pretty buildings. But that's a different story. But yeah, it's all part of a much larger package than just the ferry itself. But it can all be done, and it will be done. It's just a question of how and when. Alex, I see no hands except yours.
Well, I'll try and jump in here. Thanks so much for the invitation to come and listen in on this meeting. For those of you I haven't met yet, I'm Alex Ram. I'm state representative for the 40th District. Work alongside Representative Lekanoff and Senator Lovelet. And I just want to say I hear the frustration, not for the first time tonight, but hear it sincerely in folks' voices. I hear stress. I hear, I think John said pain. Like, it's real, and absolutely get it. I think I learn from my email inbox every time a ferry is canceled, because folks who are waiting in line for the next ferry pretty quickly start Googling and find my office and it is a continuous and constant source of frustration, and it's real. And I feel like a big part of my job in the state legislature is to hear that, translate it into actionable items, and then try and carry that to the other legislators in the building and build, a coalition that can get the funding and the policy changes that we need to try to advance solutions. Jim and Ken, I think, have done a great job of outlining a lot of the work that is underway. I will say I kind of have tried to divide the problem into sort of three parts. One is the most immediate challenges, which after the pandemic, which was we were trying to run vessels that we didn't have enough crew for. And we really need to push the administration and the ferry service to not commit to running vessels that we were never realistically going to be able to run. And so we saw cutbacks in the schedule and cutbacks in reservations. The San Juan Islands have gotten the runs rescheduled since then, but that is not the case across the entire ferry system. There are still a number of routes which are on more limited schedules than they otherwise would be this time of the year. And so I'll continue to try and hold folks' feet to the fire to make commitments that they're capable of achieving and no more. The second piece of the problem is the workforce challenge. That's short-term and midterm. This is something we've known has been coming for a long time, but it was accelerated by the pandemic, that silver tsunami of folks leaving. I think Ken's done a good job of outlining what the problems are and a large part of the solution there. I will just say, my understanding is that nobody is being laid off in the winter. And if any of you hear that folks are being laid off anymore, that's happening still, I would very much like to know about it right now, because it should not be happening. And again, we'll do everything we can to hold the ferry services feet to the fire on that. The other piece, we did invest, made a commitment for $350 million in that 16-year transportation package for workforce training, recruitment, retention, and increases in salaries, et cetera. And I will just say, the last time I was on the ferry 2 weeks ago, coming back from Friday Harbor to Anacortes, had a good conversation with a member of the deck crew who said, she was taking advantage of one of those advanced training opportunities that we had created, that it was compelling, that she's looking to move up to be part of the cabin crew. That's going to take her, another 6 months of training to get there. But it was encouraging to me to see that is in process and underway. I guess, I think everything that Ken covered in terms of and Jim covered in terms of the construction schedule, I think is accurate. I think, the potential, the one thing that I'll comment on here is sort of the potential for an alternate plan with passenger only. I think that's worth continuing to explore. Would just flag that much of the ferry's budget is paid out of our state's main transportation revenue source, the gas tax. If it's passenger only, we will be restricted from using gas tax funds for that. So that's a limiting factor on our ability to do that. Doesn't mean we can't do it, but adds some real wrinkles to trying to make that work. And then the other thing I will say is, we have this funding for 5 vessels coming. And I'm as frustrated as you all are about the challenge with getting Vigor to come back and meet the commitment in their bid. But we are where we are with that. We had to cancel that. We had to cancel that order. In the meantime, we have also, as part of that state budget. We made the commitment. We got the rest of the state legislature to commit to fully funding the state's, the ferry services long-term strategic plan. So that's the 16 vessels by 2040. We have the money identified for the first 5 of those 16, but we also have built into the language of the bill a commitment that that's where we're headed. And then the last thing I'll just note, sorry, let me note 2 more things. One, commitment on our part to keep pushing to get the Sydney run back next year. It's the 100-year anniversary. That will mean we need to have the crew in place. It will also likely mean that we need to retrofit another vessel to meet the SOLAS safety standards for the longer transits in international waters. But we should make that commitment that we're going to bring that back for that 100-year anniversary. That's a deadline that that we should be working towards, and we'll keep pushing for. And then finally, we'll just note, we also got some money into the budget this year to evaluate things that we can be doing that would encourage more walk-on passengers so that we can make the most of every vessel transit that we have. So that's everything. Everything is on the table in my mind for that, from adding parking or more convenient parking or more affordable, perhaps subsidized parking, so that folks can walk on. It means having, alternate transit, ride shares, perhaps shuttles, subsidized shuttle rates available on the other side, whether that's to and from downtown Anacortes or to and from, East Sound. So we're evaluating what are the things that we can do and can bring state money to help pay for to make sure we're doing, making the most of every vessel transit we have. Thank you all for being engaged and for the chance to participate in this. I will take questions if you want, but also happy to just go quietly. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you so very much for being here and for everything you do. We sometimes tease the legislature for being part-time, only meeting for a few months in Olympia, but we know that you guys work hard for us all year round, and really glad you could be here. Thank you. Ken, you want to jump in?
Sure. I just feel like I would be remiss not to, with Representative Ramel here, remiss not to bring up our Lopez terminal. And the reason that I wanted to bring that up is, well, first of all, is because I know Representative Ramel has been is really doing a great job to try to get some upgrades for our Lopez terminal. Last fall, I believe, he came out actually to Lopez and visited the Lopez terminal to look around. And I have also heard from John Vazina at Washington State Ferries that Representative Ramel has been very active with trying to get some funding to improve the Lopez terminal. So anyway, I just wanted to thank him for that and reiterate that I think it's a very important thing. I've talked to him already. He knows all the reasons why we need an upgrade here. So anyway, thanks for your efforts and thanks for showing up here.
Great, thank you. And just on terminals, I think we all need to remember that we're all interconnected because the boats go from one to the next. And if there's a slow unload in Friday Harbor, it's not just a Friday Harbor problem. All the boats get late. We're about out of time. Kaya, you want to make a last comment?
Yeah, just a few things that I haven't touched base on. The comment on Lopez reminds me that the Lopez schedule is really, really weird, and it's been really weird for a while now. So I don't know who is weighing in on the actual scheduling, but I would highly encourage you that we actually hold a meeting specifically with locals around what locals think they need for scheduling, because a lot of times I feel like that falls on deaf ears and it's not prioritized around known issues like what times the kids arrive at schools and things like that. It's actually really a mess right now. And then man, I had another really good one, but it had to do with, give me 2 seconds and I'll remember. The kids, and then the bidding is when that got brought up earlier, is this not something that is bid on? Are we like at the mercy of one place and only one place? Because maybe that should be reviewed. I don't understand that.
It's complicated.
Okay.
Let me just answer very briefly, and I think we can, we'll have to talk about it, and we're happy to talk about it in depth later. Bidding, ferry workers, this is a transportation job. They work wherever needed all over the system. They bid according to their seniority in the organization, and that's union agreements. Obviously, the guys that have tons of decades of experience get the first choice, and the guy who started yesterday gets the last choice. And that's not something we can deal with at all. I mean, that's very employment rules and union rules. But it is a thing, and it is a factor sometimes. But generally, it all sorts out. That's about all I can say at this point. But thank you.
And I remember the other thing that I had. I would really like to see these meetings be more community based, meaning there's a whole bunch of essential workers and the people that are really the glue to the islands that are not going to be coming to a Zoom meeting. And I think that we need to cater a little bit more to the locals, because the locals have a lot of the solutions at the immediate attention that need immediate attention right now. And it's been brought up that a lot of locals jumped in and advocated for each other and provided services and did that through different networking. But I would like to see these meetings held in person. We're out of the pandemic. Let's get together. Let's hold these meetings where other people can be available. And I think that in the comments with that, when that happens, is that we'll learn that there are a lot of people that want to provide. And what I'm hearing is a lot of like, I'm going to be a senior when these things happen. And that's concerning to me, because right now in real time, we need to figure out a way to help with the expenses, to get people hotel rooms, to help them, with getting food to the ferry landings when they're stranded. There's not necessarily, Orcas, if you get stranded at that ferry landing, thankfully they started bringing more food to that ferry landing, but there's just a lot of things that are happening in real time right now that can't wait until the next election year. It's just not a reality.
Who said elections?
I'm just saying that like we can't just put these off for years is what I'm trying to get at. Is it can't be till we vote on this or we vote on that. I mean, like right now there's real-time issues that thankfully we're coming out of the summer season, so it's going to be less stressful, because we always have it's a better experience in the winters. But let's not rest on our laurels or whatever that quote is. We just need to remember what summer hell was like for us and figure that out before summer comes up again.
Trust me, there's no laurels to rest upon. We understand completely. Thank you very much. All right. We're past our agreed time. Everyone's got things they need to do. I want to thank everyone for being here. Appreciate it. Oh, Jennifer, you have your hand up. I'm sorry, I missed it. It's against your blind, so I didn't see it. Go ahead.
I just want to invite people to attend our regular FAC meetings. We hold them once a month. They are public meetings. And currently we're holding them in the evenings on Tuesdays at 5:30, but I think that is going to change. And maybe Jim, you can talk a little bit more about why it's going to change and maybe what to expect.
I'd be happy to if I knew what was going to happen. We've been, FAC used to meet, this is pre-COVID, in person, no Zoom, no nothing prior to all that nonsense, in Friday Harbor, and then other islands sort of on a once a year basis move around. It was brutal on the members, getting up and catching the early in-around boat to get to Friday Harbor by 8:30 and hang around till noon to get home, just like everyone else has troubles. We've been meeting on Zoom since pandemic. It is mostly over. I've got two good friends right now that are sick, and we're not visiting with them. Put them off at other end of the room, please, if we happen to be in the same room. So it's not completely over. The provisions that allowed Zoom meetings are expiring, I think, at the end of October. We will be having a physical presence. We will continue to allow our members to meet by Zoom, and we will take comments by Zoom. We've focused recently on trying to do more public outreach at the FAC level. Ferries is also working on public outreach. They intend at this time to continue to do it by web conference as they've done for the last couple of years. We really would encourage them to get some of the senior staff on the road and meet in person with the communities. They used to do that. Sometimes it was only a couple of guys from Ferries, but being able to share a room with the folks that actually make the decisions, I think is much more satisfying. And I think one of the things we try to do is be inclusive. We're not asking you to submit questions and we'll sort through them. And this is new for us too. So yeah. But we will post in, 10 days before the next meeting, which will be probably the second week of next month, but not a Tuesday because that's council meeting day, and it will probably be during the daytime because we need county staff to help us out. They don't leave the key with us. So with that, stay tuned. It's the best I can say. All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Have a good evening. We will be getting this tape organized and up on the county website. And we do have an FAC page, which is sanjuanco.com/FAC, which is right now got a banner that says is under reconstruction. But do check. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Let's see, stop recording. Where did the record button go? It disappears when you're recording. There it is, up there. Stop recording. Yes, I want to